This is Felice,
I'm Kim.
and you're listening to Work It, the only podcast where we get honest about your situation at work. We believe that work can affect our whole person, including our personal lives and, yes, even our health. Our goal is to leave you empowered, encouraged, and energized in your everyday work life. So pull up because this is where the real orientation and the fun begins. Hey, Kim.
Hey there, Felice. I'm so excited. Today we're going to talk about something I really love talking about, and it's the boss. I mean, we really have talked about so many aspects of work, but we really need to drill down on you need to know who you're going to be working with and who's working with you. And if you don't have a clear sense of what's going on and how to interact with that person on so many different levels, then you're going to be having a lot of trouble at that new job, and we don't want that.
Absolutely. The boss is always a big deal, and everybody has a boss. Even the boss has a boss.
That's
So,
right.
in addition to talking about our relationship with our bosses, I want to talk about when we're the boss and what that means. So, let's kick it off. What's on your mind?
Well, I love being my own boss, and I'll tell you why. Because I work hard, I grind hard, and that means I have to know when it's time to take a break. I have to know how to reorder my schedule. I still have to be productive, if not more, because I'm working for my brand. And so that means I have to work 10 times as hard. But when you're working for other people, they need to feel the same thing, that your hands are on deck and that you are off to the mission of the organization. So it's really important to be thoughtful and intentional about that, because you can wake up and say, oh, it's just that job and I don't like this person, or I don't like this. But when you work for yourself, you can't do that. I have to get up in the morning and say, I got to get it done. And it doesn't matter if I'm happy about it or sad. This is the life I've chosen. And I like being my own boss because I know when I'm having a good day and I know when I'm having a bad day. And I know how to say, all right, push through, Kim, push through, because you got to get this done.
So, a lot of us we're not our own bosses. We're going to an office every day, or we're going to a building, or we're sitting on Zoom, and there are people telling us what to do, how to do it. There are people who are directing our work, people who can make hire and fire decisions, who can decide how much money we get paid, who can decide whether or not we get that promotion, who evaluate our performance. And I think that relationship with that person or those individuals is just so key. So, I think for me, number one is whenever you're getting ready to take on a new job, be very intentional about not only the organization you want to work for, but the type of person you want to work for, because that person that you're working for can make or break your experience.
Oh, you know what? Absolutely. I mean, the key for me, somebody like me, is I really like to work for smart people, and it's not necessarily an intellectual smart. It could include that, but it also includes a sort of people intelligence. It also includes, the great leadership skills, compassion, and thoughtfulness, and insightfulness and focus. I like a person who knows how to grind too. I mean, that's part of how they get to be who they are. And you should be watching. People just take everything at face value. Well, they're the boss. You should be watching. What is it that they do that makes them boss material? And you should be observing that. Do they grind? Do they come in earlier than you and work later than you? That's a style that you need to pay attention to, because when they leave, they're looking around to see who's there. And when they get there in the morning, I guarantee you they're checking to see who's there. So you need to be checking too, and you need to be there before them.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how much I agree with that last part, just about showing up um, as a boss and having had bosses. I've always wanted to show up and perform in a way that my boss understood that I was giving 110%, right? Not just 100%, but going over and above the expectation, that I was treating the operation as though it were my own operation. I'm putting in that sweat equity, right? Working smart and not necessarily always just grinding so hard, right? The grind is important, but you got to be strategic about it too, because otherwise you're just spinning your wheels and grinding. But I always wanted my boss to see that. And then once I became somebody's boss, I was looking for that. I wanted someone to come in with a fresh attitude, optimistic, hardworking, creative, right, and resourceful, in doing their job. And so I wasn't looking for the person who at 4:59 has already packed up their desk, saying that they're leaving because they have to go catch the train or whatever, or they need to get out the parking lot. I get it; those are real life issues, but we all have real life issues. And so, if I could stay 5 minutes after five, my thought is that maybe you can stay 5 minutes after five if we are working to the task and not the time.
I think that's more of a mindset thing. And again, when I talk about grind, there's always a time at work when you need to grind, but that time is not 24 hours a day, every day. You have to know when to grind. You have to know when to work smart. You have to know when you're putting in FaceTime. I'll be candid with you. As long as you work for somebody else, there is FaceTime. There is time that you're there so that they can see that your face is there when they are there. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's really because it's not like you could write them a note like you'd send one to your mother. Dear mom, I'm all in for you. I support you. I want to be here for you and I'm working hard. You can't send that to your boss and they wouldn't believe it if you did. But if you're there when they're looking around for somebody, it may be that they're looking for somebody to do the task that you've been dying to do. And you were the only one there. I remember once being at the office on a Saturday. I was the only person there other than the boss. And he was bragging to his son, she works for me, right? Because she was there on Saturday morning. And that was part of my own work ethic. I didn't know my boss would be coming in, and I didn't know that nobody else would be there but me. But I tell you what, that was some great job security that day. I can tell you that for sure. So, you just never know. You don't work for the image that other people want. You work partly because it is your brand and your ethic, but you should be watching this other person because there will be cues that will make your life easier. If I thought that being there a couple hours on Saturday morning would get me, great brownie points and opportunities, I would just block 2 hours into my Saturday to be there. I mean, you don't have to do it every Saturday, and nobody would even know that you did it except for the people who needed to know. And it says a lot about who you are. So you make decisions using all the information you have in front of you. I think the key for us in our discussions is we're trying to point for people the places that they may not have thought of. We're trying to open more doors for them so that the mistakes that many people make, they won't make.
Absolutely. That coming in on Saturdays or staying a little bit later, that just goes to going over and above and doing whatever it takes to get the job done. And, I think for the most part, that's why it's so important to love what you do. You have to love what you do. I cannot stress that enough. You have to love what you do and you have to love where you're doing it, or at least be able to tolerate stomach where you're doing it, because then the Saturday work, the evening work, yes, it's going to seem like I'm working on a Saturday. I'm not going to lie about that. It's not gonna, if everybody else is out at some big event and you're sitting at the office doing discovery, that's just going to feel whack, right? But if you love what you do and you really love the experience you're getting, the organization you work for, then it's going to seem like it's worth it. In fact, not seem, it's going to be worth it. I remember I had a big case one time I was preparing for, and I sent out a subpoena. Well, respondent decided to deliver, all these unmarked boxes with unmarked documents to the office on a Friday at 5 o'clock, right? And now I have to go through all these documents by Monday. Like, I need to go through this stuff. Well, what did I do? I pulled up on a and I sat there and I spread everything out, and I did all the data analysis and everything that I needed. But my point, ladies and gentlemen, is that I loved what I did so much that for me, it was cool. Okay, you did it. Data Great. I was waiting for all of this data. And guess what? Now I'm going to use all this data to make my case. Thank you so much. Because I'm not afraid of coming in on a Saturday because I love what I do.
Yeah, again, Saturday is, people say that, but you know what? A couple hours on Saturday or half a day on Saturday can make your whole week a better place because that 4 quiet hours or 2 quiet hours or 6 quiet hours can give you back time in the week that you might need for other things or might need for different projects. So it's not that you're, giving up and making some supreme sacrifice. Actually, it's really always all about you. What will make life easier for you? And getting this data dump at 5 o'clock on Friday, which is a typical tactic of many lawyers. I hate to say that, and I'm sure it happens in every occupation there is. I'm sure accountants get this. I'm sure architects get this. Oh, the change order comes in at 5 o'clock on Friday. There are a lot of people that's just how they do, and some of it is intentional. Some of it is purposeful to make your life miserable. But you know what? If I'm there on Saturday because of you, you're going to be on Saturday because of me one day. Not because I data dumped you at 5 o'clock on Friday, but because I worked so hard with the information you gave me that now I'm throwing fits in all the documents that you have to deal with when you get my responses. So it's all good in the neighborhood. Everything has a yin and a yang to it. And this is just one of those things.
Well, Kim, I was recently reading an article that talked about some of the struggle there's been in the workplace lately with younger bosses coming in to manage more senior individuals who have been with the organization for a decade or more. In fact, the article talked more about individuals who may have been with the organization for 20 plus years, and now they have either a older millennial or a younger millennial coming in. And when I say millennial, folks, let's get into it. Millennials are now in the 40 range. What millennials are no longer 20 years old. And I know we keep saying millennial and thinking 20, but that's Gen Z now. Millennials have grown up, right? But they're coming into these management, leadership, executive roles. And sometimes there might be an older, more senior workforce who may not be as receptive to that young leader.
Yeah, I totally see that, and I've been seeing it. In other positions I've had, I watched it in various workplaces. I think the key for everyone in those situations is the person who's been there has got to say to themselves on some level, this person must have something, right? Our organization was in need of some talent or skill that we did not have. And if we allow this person to enhance us, maybe we can do the things we used to do, but maybe we can do them bigger, better, faster than we would have had we not hired this person. And then for the person who's coming in who's younger, who's encountering all these people who've been there many more years and decades than them, they should be open to figuring out, well, what is it that they were doing? They've been here. There must be a reason to have kept them. So there's something they know that I need to know. And in that situation, I would encourage people to take the time to figure that out first. Now, if it turns out that, you can't teach an old dog a new trick, that's one thing. If it turns out that the new person is using a textbook model of what should be done and we don't make textbooks, then that's a different question. But at the outset, I would give everybody a shot. And I think that's the problem, is that people don't give you the shot to say, oh my gosh, they picked this person because they're innovative and they're using this technology and we're gonna do what we're doing, but we're gonna do it better. And then the person who's there, sometimes, you have to give them some benefit of the doubt. The company was able to do what it did as long as it did it without you. The world's not gonna end if it does it without you again. So the key is, how do you find a way? And I always like to think of work as like a combination lock. We're testing the tumblers a little to the right. We're testing the tumblers a little to the left. And then we're trying to unlock something. And sometimes you unlock things in a way that you didn't anticipate. You never can tell. I have seen situations where that younger millennial person takes their senior person with them when they leave because they form such a tight partnership.
Absolutely. I think allyship is really, really key. But allyship requires relationship, and relationships are reciprocal. You can't expect someone else to always be pouring into you and you never pour in to them in the relationship. It's a give and take. So I think for the new leader coming in, it's really important to be respectful and understand some of the history of the organization, and how they have been successful in many spaces. But I also think it's incumbent upon those who have been there to understand that clearly, if the organization has selected someone from the outside to come in, maybe they're trying to take this in a new direction, and to be responsive to that and to help steer the boat, not anchor it down and not want to move and say, I know that I've been doing this for 20 years and you've only been alive for 20 years. That is just not the way to go.
I
Form
was
a
doing this before the ink was dry on your diploma. Okay, well, that's nice. I didn't know the ink dried. Is it that kind of old ink or is it new ink? I mean,
and so
that's a bad road to go down.
it's like, let's put our heads together and figure out how we can really drive this forward and do some amazing things. When you combine the generational differences, you can do amazing things because you can create better, right? Because you have people who are grounded in the organization, they understand the organization, they understand some of the things that have been tried and failed, right? And then you have somebody coming in who has the benefit of being a little green, and maybe they're not bogged down by all the bureaucracy and we can't, right? Put those
I
things
like
together
that.
and you can do some amazing things, but both sides have to be open to that.
I love that. You're absolutely right about that. People so rarely think about that. But, the reason it's called work is because you must work at it. You must work at the relationships. You must work with your colleagues. You must work with people who are not your colleagues, but who are professionals in your organization. You must work with people who are more senior. You must work with people who are more junior. You must work with people who aren't even in your department. And if you can master that skill, then you can do that anywhere. You can take that with you everywhere. But if you don't have that skill, you're going to have the same problems everywhere you go.
Everywhere you go. And it's not a popularity contest. You've heard us talk about it's not necessarily being liked
Mm-mm.
everywhere you go, because that's going to be impossible, and you're going to be ineffective because you're trying to please everybody, and everybody can't be pleased. But it is about being strategic in forming good, solid relationships that can help you get the work done. Even when I do traditional labor and I deal with unions a lot. Well, a lot of times getting the work done also requires reaching across the aisle and being able to have these conversations with the other side to get things done. And we don't always see eye to eye. In fact, a lot of the time we don't. But at the end of the day, we both have an obligation to the employees and to our clientele. And so we both have an interest in doing what is best for the organization to meet the needs of those two constituencies. So sometimes it's not about being liked, but it's about being able to form those relationships, even with people who are on an opposing side when it comes to your organization.
Well, Felice, you know how I feel about this. I like is not a quality that I need at work. I have friends already. They like me. I like them. We're done with the like. Okay. At work, I have to be respected. And respect is always earned. It's never given. It is not a chiclet. You can't walk by and say, here's some respect. Would you like some? You must earn it. And that is how you handle yourself. Are you collegial? Are you collaborative? Are you petty? Are you always gossiping? Are you always talking about people? Because if you're that person, it's going to be hard to get respect. People might like to hear the tea, but they are not necessarily thinking to themselves, boy, I want them to lead this organization into the next century. It's just not happening. So you have to pick. And I'm telling you, if you get respect, you might get some like, some real honest to goodness like. But if you don't have respect, none of the other qualities will matter.
So, we've been talking about as well the relationship with the boss. And when there's a line, right, that should not be crossed. Like we talked about the Lizzo case and some of the allegations about going to a strip club with the boss, right? But what about romantic relationships with the boss? I've been seeing a lot of that in the news lately. And I don't think that's a good look. I think you keep your romance outside of the workplace. I'm sorry, that's just me.
I also think that if you have met, let me tell you something. It's hard to meet somebody that you're prepared to really, throw yourself so into this relationship that nothing else matters. If that's the case, go get another job. Y'all don't have to work together. If the relationship is only dependent on the fact that y'all see each other every day from 9 to whenever, then maybe that's not the relationship you think it is. So if it's true love, right? And I mean, it happens. You see it happen, but it can't, because it can't happen at work. People will know. It is very hard. You almost never hear a story where they say, and we were dating for 5 years at the same office and no one knew. And then one day we got married. I have you read any of those stories? I haven't read any. I'm looking for some of those. It rarely happens. And I think that's because a lot of it is situational. You work all night, they work all night. You want to have dinner when you get off because you're hungry now because you've been at work 12 hours, 15 hours. Here's this person. They're funny. They're talking about the same things you're talking about. They're laughing at the same bosses you're laughing at. They're giggling about the same people who did something funny in the coffee room that you are. You have all these things in common, and now you're having dinner. It's late at night. You're relaxed. You're getting ready to go home, and one drink becomes two drinks, and you're easy on the eyes. They're easy on the eyes, and over time maybe that develops into a real relationship. But is it worth trading your accountability and your respect at work? And I will say, I know this is probably not, I'm gonna say controversial, but certainly not popular to say out loud. But I think it's harder for women than it is for men. A man can be sleeping with damn near the whole office, and people are like, "Yeah, that's the kind of hard driving guy he is." But
Not me. Don't
but
put me over the internal investigation because that's not
well,
what I'm going to
I'm
say.
not saying I won't fire him. That is not what I said. I fired people like that effortlessly and with very little, proof of it. I just needed some proof. But what I'm saying to you is that women tend not to fare as well in those situations. Even if you fire the man in the investigation, they usually go on. No one, that's not to most people, they don't treat that like, oh, well, he was bad at work. They treat it as, he was a ladies' man and he needs to just have a little warning not to do that at work. But women, I mean, we practically get a scarlet letter if something like that happens at the office. So we have to be really, we have to be a lot more cautious about whether this is part of our overarching plan versus this is something that happened to you and you fell. I love all the love words. You fell into it. And it
I think that women take it harder for a lot of things. I think men just have sometimes an easier, smoother recovery. I don't care if they've been fired for having an inappropriate relationship at work or just being a flat out jerk. Um, they may not even be fired before being a flat out jerk. How many of us know men or have seen men or know of men who yell in the workplace, who may even put their hands on people in the workplace, and they're still in the workplace. So I just think that women have it harder all the way around. But I will say that I am aware, I might be aware of two power couples who work for the same organization, right? And they've made it work for a long period of time, both couples.
But are they
right?
married already and they
They
came
are
from the
married. And
organization?
they met at the organization, they got married, stayed married, and it's been decades. Sometimes it
Yeah.
works, people. Sometimes
Every
it works. Those people are very successful at separating the personal from the business. They are very good at not bringing home to work. But for everybody else that's out here, I can't say we're all built that way. And sometimes relationships go awry, or, when is it okay to hug or to kiss or to, pat someone on the rear? Like that's just you don't need to bring into your work situation. That's just better kept outside.
Yeah, I mean, and again, if you find that there are people in your workplace and that's their MO, then you make sure you make the adjustments. You're not there with them alone. You're not drinking with them at the reception. You're not drinking with them at the cocktail party. You can adjust those things. You can be part of the group and then gone when the group is gone. You just have to plan a little better because the object is not to expose yourself to people who are toxic on their face. If you already know the person is toxic and they have a toxic reputation, this is not the time to think, oh, I'm different, or it'll be different, or we've had a different interaction. People are who they are, and you're not trying to test that theory on people who have already demonstrated who they are.
So, what about when we just what if I don't like my boss? I just because there are a lot of people who just don't like the boss. And that's okay. The boss, you don't have to. A lot of people don't like their boss. The boss
Yeah,
may not even like her boss, darn
yes,
it.
may
A
not
lot
like
of
you.
people don't like, and the boss may not like you. They still have to work with you day in and day out, and their job is to not illegally discriminate against you, right? And
Right.
mistreat you, abuse you. But they don't have to like you to love you. They don't have to think you're the best thing since sliced bread, even if all your coworkers think you are, right? So even if you don't like your boss, listen, I mentor people and I do training for people, and I always try to say, don't let your disdain for the boss get in the way of you doing your job. So many people allow their disdain for the boss to get in the way of them doing their job, their very best at their job. Listen, if you want to slack off because you don't like the boss, guess who's going to, that's not going to hurt the boss. I mean, it will, but the boss is still going to come to you,
Well, that's
right? If
not
you,
intuitive that that will do anything good. I mean, I don't get how that follows. I don't like you, so I'm doing less for you, and I'm doing less of the job that I was hired to do. That already is a setup for very bad things. I mean, the reality of it is, you should be working harder if you don't like the boss, because you are trying to hide the fact that every day you go home and look for another job. Because if you can't work with the person you're paid to work with, by definition, someone must leave. And if it isn't them, it must be you.
or I have to prove the boss wrong. I have to go in a meeting and prove the boss wrong, or I got to try to sabotage the boss. I got to try to do stuff to make the boss look like the boss didn't know what they were doing. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Don't let your disdain for your boss get in the way of you doing your job. You still work it. You still do rock star kind of work. And when you get off, that's when you call your BF and you're like, I don't know how much longer I can take this. But you still show up and you still give 110%.
This situation that Felice is giving you sounds like something from one of those TV movies where you come home and you say, my boss is awful and I just can't stand my boss. And your friend goes, girl, you need to sabotage that boss. You need to, take the key document out of their report. And you need to, and all the while you're doing that, there's a camera, there's another colleague, and they are going to catch you doing that, and you will be jobless and hopefully not homeless, because they will do everything they can to discredit you every which way, but loose. So try. When you get that advice, you should go, that Felice and that Kim said, oh no, that's not the right advice. I need to try something different. Work hard, keep your hands on the deck, And when you go home, look for a job like you're running to catch the boat before it leaves you on its way to paradise. I want you to be running toward that boat, but not sabotaging people, because that says more about you than it says about the other person.
It really does. And in the end, the boss is that we did we just talked about performance appraisals, right? So, that's gonna come up if you're out there, because now you're wasting the organization's time too, because you're too busy trying to dip and dive and connive, right? You're not doing the work. You're scheming. So let's focus on getting the work done. Kim, you talked about, cameras being around. What about, we live in the record everything era?
You know,
And
I've been praying for Shirley Strawberry. I've been just praying for her because, she made a mistake that anybody could make, but you just want to highlight it so that people don't make it in the future. If you are going to talk about your boss and you have called your significant other, but wherever it is that your significant other is, the first words on the line are, "You are talking on a recorded line." If you hear those words, by definition, you know that you are not having a private conversation. I bet you those calls were released pursuant to FOIA. I'm sure that's what happened. And I'm sure that FOIA was never intended to make that happen, but that's probably how it happened. And the reality of that is, it makes you look like you have poor judgment, because it's not so much that you told someone that, it's that you told them that in a recorded space. So it's almost as if it didn't bother you that someone else would have this on tape.
now what we're talking about here is apparently Steve Harvey, people know Steve Harvey, has a personality who is part of his team on his radio show. Her name is Shirley Strawberry. Apparently, she made some comments about Steve years ago. And when she made those comments, they were on a recorded line. Now, we don't have the full context of the conversation,
No,
so we
and we
can't
never
go
will.
deep and into that. But, I think Kim and I both left, the news of that, thinking, well, wow, how unfortunate to be on a recorded line saying some not so great things about someone who is likely your boss. I don't know if he is the official boss on paper, but he, at least he purports to be the boss.
It's the Steve Harvey Morning Show. I can assure you, on the Felice and Kim podcast, if somebody that is working on the podcast does not like us, I feel comfortable that if Felice comes to me and says, well, Kim, she's been talking about me and she's called me everything but a child of God, I would be like, well, Felice, it's clearly some other people who can do what this person does. And that, we don't like to say goodbye to people, but sometimes we're not the right fit. That's what you say. That's everywhere in the world. I totally know he's executive producer of his own show, so he clearly can make that decision. But, this is a thing that can be avoided. And I think that's what we're trying to help people with. There's some stuff people do and don't give it any thought. It's sort of like posting that, sexy witch costume on your social media. You don't mean any harm when you do it. Even the things she said weren't, they weren't, monstrous things. They were things you say about your boss. Like, child, he was wheezing walking up the stairs. I mean, you could say that. I'd probably said much worse about some of my bosses, but I didn't say them on a recorded line. I didn't throw it in their face. I think the difference here is that these are two people who have great and mutual respect for each other. And he's a comedian, so he can see the funny even in something that's not funny. So I think that's why that situation is going to come out the way it should. And she should be able to have that opportunity to demonstrate that was an aberration. But for most people in most situations, that's not going to be the case. That is not, the team is not going to welcome you back with open arms and say, girl, we saw you going through it. We were just waiting for you to come and hug us, and we're going to keep it moving. I think that is the beauty of that situation. But that is so not what's going to, that is so not what's going to happen at the Lizzo crowd. They're not all ever going to have a hug me kumbaya. We went in two different directions, but we really just were missing each other. That's not going to happen.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe, but I, you
But I
know,
want to go back to something because you were just saying something about the recorded line. I think that's important because we live in this record everything era. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand before you start recording people and you're out there, you're sitting on Zoom with your phone going and you're recording, or the boss calls you and you hit tap record on your phone. There are things called wiretapping laws, okay, that govern whether or not you can legally record a conversation with somebody else. Okay. And in some places, there's some states, it's okay if you're the only person that knows that you're recording. But then there's other states that say, the person has to know that you're recording as well.
that's
So
right.
before you get out there, you're like saying, oh, I recorded this. You need to understand the jurisdiction that you're in.
Check
And
your
that's
map of the
called
state.
a one party, two party, or all party consent jurisdiction. I'm gonna say that again because I want y'all to Google that. One party, two party, or all party consent jurisdiction. Understand what jurisdiction that you're in, right? Really look into that, ladies and gentlemen, because you don't want to be in a situation where you say, aha, I got you on tape, boss, or coworker, or whoever. And they say, okay, well, we're in a two-party consent jurisdiction, and I didn't know that you were recording me. So thank you for letting me know that. I will now proceed with wanting to press charges against you because this is problematic. You don't want that type of a situation. I'm not saying, don't protect yourself. Just when you're protecting yourself and how you choose to protect yourself in conversations and meetings, etc., you need to be mindful of what the rules are in terms of recording other people. We saw it in, now I'm going to date myself, we saw it in the Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp matter, where it boiled down to, well, where was Linda Tripp when she was recording these conversations with Monica Lewinsky? You see it in the recording that, was just released of the LA City Council person making these racially charged comments. Notice that whoever did the recording, whoever hit record, has not come forward. They're just saying an anonymous recording. Why? Because California is a two-party consent jurisdiction. And so it wasn't necessarily lawful to sit there and record that conversation. And the parties to that conversation didn't know that they were being recorded.
And the friend of the recording is the hot mic. That's my favorite. Yes, that's when you're somewhere and there are lots of mics. You may not be the person who's up at the mic, but you're near the mic. You're around the mic. And the mic may be hot. You may not know. The mic doesn't say, I'm hot. Please don't say anything around me. But you see all these other cases where people said something on the hot mic and it was equally disturbing, equally inappropriate, equally just wrong. And now we don't even have to worry about those recording laws because you took it upon yourself to say what you said in front of a hot mic that you may not have known was hot, but it was definitely, definitely hot. I did a reality TV show back in the day, and we would be mic'd, you'd walk around. And I remember at the end of one of the shows, like we pretended to do a trial. So I would represent somebody and another lawyer would represent somebody. And we had our TV judge. And I remember at the end of the thing, after the end of the trial, I turned to my client and I said, his client is poison and he's poison. And this is the life they've chosen. And that was like the whole soundbite of what I did that day. But I didn't realize that my mic was still live. And of course, the little producers were like, "Oh, that's the most exciting thing she said the whole show." And make no mistake, that made it onto the air. Again, after having seen the show, you could understand why I said it, so I didn't take it back. But again, I wasn't aware that I was being taped, but I was mic'd, so why not tape what I'm saying? So keep an open mind about that because you may not think it's something that applies to you, but it can.
So, I think that big picture here, when we're talking about bosses, we need to not only be thinking about the fact that we report to someone, right? But as a boss, we should be thinking about how we interface with other people as well. And my takeaway, my big picture takeaway from the Steve Harvey and Shirley Strawberry situation, um, is that there was a certain level of grace that he exercised. And I'm so proud of that because as leaders, we have to be able to extend grace. A lot of people are not going to get it right the first time, even the second time. They don't know any better sometimes, right? Sometimes people are dealing with their own hurt and their own situation and they just projecting on you or they're taking it out on you, right? Some people are suffering from PTSD because they left a bad situation before, so now they come into your situation, they think that everything is bad because they suffered somewhere else. But our job as leaders is to be able to extend grace sometimes to people and say, you know what I know of you is actually better than this. So I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to come for you. I'm not going to all of a sudden make your life misery. I'm going to extend grace to you. Now, also know that, listen, the grace is only so much grace you go get. So you can't get the grace and then go cut up again. And they give you some more grace and you keep, because I know the Bible says 7 times over, but in real life and every day, day to day, that's probably not gonna work. After a while, the boss is gonna say, I've extended a lot of grace to you, I've given you a lot of opportunities, and you keep squandering them. And I can't keep trusting you, and I can't have you on my team.
I just love, love, love that you called it an extension of grace by a leader. I mean, that most people would not have said it that way. We live in a world that's so sort of cancel you, mean, cut you off, block you off, beat you down, take you out. And you're absolutely right. It was the grace. It was the grace that we're not going to let y'all talk about this. We're going to talk about it ourselves. And we're going to let you know that this team is about the grace. And that is leadership. That's what you want. If your boss has that, you can't. If you look for another job, you're not going to find that, because grace is one of those things that when someone is able to have their cup full enough to grant it to you, you've got to recognize that you were very, very special and you've been chosen, and you need to lean into that. But it is very rare that you see people, and I think now, you don't see as much grace now. Everybody is so busy trying to prove that they can cut you off and cancel you. And, we're human beings. People make mistakes. And some of these mistakes are not that big a deal. They're not, what I tell people? Did you sleep with my husband? And I don't even have a husband. Did you cut my child? Or did you get me fired from my job? If you really need me to be mad at you, these are the category of things that are required. So if you just said something about me that, you probably could have refrained from saying, I may not like what you did, and I need to let you know I didn't like what you did, but am I willing to cancel you, cut you out of my life when together we have done things that we couldn't even have imagined? I mean, that's like cutting off your own nose to spite your face. I mean, it shows what vision that person has to be able to say, oh, we riding this way. And we're not letting this little stumbling block, we're not letting this other person's karma interfere with what we're building over here, because we know what we do. And
We know
all
what
the
we
snaps to
do.
that. We know what we
We
do.
know what we do. And there are many rock bands. I love rock music, and I won't go down the list, but there are some rock bands where the actual band members haven't gotten along for years. decades. But guess what? They put out those albums, they do those shows, they do those tours. They've stayed together through the decades, and they
Mhm.
are still creating great music. They do the photo shoots together. They do everything because why? They are focused on the overall bigger mission here, which is we have a band, right?
Justin Timberlake just sang with NSYNC, at the VMAs. Look at that. They haven't sung together in 20 years, but now all of a sudden, when he's doing his Trolls movie, get the band back together. Well, the band is back together, and this is how people feed their families. I could be mad at you all day long, but if we feed my family, I can put a whole lot of stuff to the side, particularly when you've built something that everyone dreams of doing. And can we even name a band where they didn't get back together at some point? Because they're smart enough to realize, look at New Edition. We got New Edition, we got Bobby Brown, we got BBD, we got Ralph Tresvant, we got them all different.
But
We
they've
got
always been like brothers. I think their camaraderie and their brotherhood, I think it's totally different than a lot. I think they really, and I don't know these gentlemen, but about the
Temptations. This is different from the Temptations. I mean, the only difference is
oh
these
well,
guys
David
were more
Ruffin.
innovative.
Let me stop because I don't know. I can't really even talk. Now, see, that's a conversation for my mom because she can tell you
Sorry.
when David Ruffin did whatever he did.
5 heartbeats.
Oh,
I'll do some movie ones. Hey, do the 5 heartbeats. I'll do a movie for you. But I mean, it's based on all of these groups. All of them are based on the same story. And this story happens no matter whether it's, you know, New Edition or whether it's NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. It's the same story. Somebody, they get to a point and somebody wants to go on their own and they're not talking, and then one day everybody's been sitting at home for a while and people are clamoring to hear them do it again, and they come back. So it doesn't matter whether we use New Edition, Temptations, whoever. It's always, we can start in with the girl groups. It's the same, whether it's the Supremes or whether it's oh gosh, I'm blanking on all these names.
big point is because
Or
in those
Destiny's Child.
but in a band, I think just going back to the boss component, I just think the main point here is that they focused on something bigger. Steve Harvey is focused on something bigger. Hopefully Shirley is focused on something bigger. Steve could have went back. Did he go back and try to sabotage her and go back to the other members of the team and say, well, she said, and oh no, everybody gonna give her the silent treatment when she comes in, and we're gonna have these meetings and not invite her, and we're gonna basically create an environment where she just has to leave because she's gonna be so uncomfortable. No, that's not what grace looks like. That's not leadership. That's pettiness. So keep an eye on that. It's not only the fact that he didn't come for her and just fire her, he also didn't create a situation, as far as we know, where it was so uncomfortable for her that she had no choice than to leave, right?
Listen, the other day, all of them said it. The whole morning show team said, we were waiting for you. We were here for you. We were trying to make it okay for you here. We knew they live in America. They got friends. Everybody got a cousin that tells them the news that they don't want to hear. So they knew. It's not like it was a surprise. These tapes are, like you said, from 2022 or wherever. They knew, but they made a choice that she was more important than what happened. And how much grace is that when you've created your team in grace, right? Not just the leader has grace, but all the people he picked for his team have grace. I just snaps to that, because you don't see that often. And I mean, look at this. We're looking at all these night show hosts. They have these talk show hosts. They have these toxic. The staff are just, you don't know whether you're going to get the good version or the bad version. People having to apologize. But look at me. I would try not to be too mad at them, because, when they go home and decide they don't want to do those shows no more, you don't have no job. So there's a balance. But we didn't get to that here. And I'm so happy to see that this team of people of color were able to make a different choice, a higher level choice, not to go out, like you said, bad mouthing each other and talking about each other. No, they focused on, we're a team and we're waiting for you. You're the one who's had something happen that's taken you off our gracious path. But our path is our vision, and we're coming back for you because we know you fell astray. We just gonna get you back on our path. We're not gonna have this every 5 days. Somebody come up and say, "Oh, it was toxic and we didn't get along, and you had a good day and I had a bad day." No, we're gonna operate from grace. That's a lesson that if you can learn it as an employee and you can maintain it when you're a boss, that's the thing that legacy is made out of.
And I think that's a perfect point to leave off on, is remembering to be graceful, to extend grace to other people. If we're the boss, extend some grace to those that we supervise. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have tough conversations some of the time, but we can do so with grace. And if you are responding to a boss, extend some grace that way too, because they too are people and human, and they have families and they have all the feelings that you have. They have all the obligations, the bills, the sick parent they have to care for. They have all of that too. So Kim, with that, I just think that's a perfect note to leave off on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to another episode of Work It, the podcast where we get honest about your situation at work. I am your host, Felice.
I'm Kim.
And we are so glad you joined us. And you just keep on doing what, Kim?
Working it.
Until next time, work it.